morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and as always told, out of Voice Radio. So today, I want to show you what I think might be, legitimately, not clickbaity, legitimately the weirdest Pokemon card we've ever actually had. I know, I am fully aware that saying that is a rather bold claim indeed. But I'm also aware of how gosh darn weird this card is. It's Dusknoir Level X. A card that, well, it's a Pokemon, right? But the Pokemon turns into a stadium and is essentially unkillable. So as far as I'm concerned, that makes it pretty gosh darned weird. So we have a look at what it actually does then. It is a Level X. Now, that in and of itself is kind of awkward. Now, Level X, I did a video actually about the top 10 Level X's. I'll pop a link in the description. But essentially, Level X's were Pokemon that you leveled up. So, for instance, you would get a Stage 2 Dusknoir, and you would then level it up into Dusknoir Level X. It was an extra evolution that went on top. It could only be done when you were in the active. And to add a little bit more spice to it, Dusknoir Level X had the same name as Dusknoir, so instead of having 4 of the regular 4 of the Level X's, you could only have 4 in combination of the regular and the Level X. But what this Dusknoir did, it was very much worth getting all the way up, as awkward as it was. Now, it's also one of the longest worded abilities we've ever seen. Deep breath. If Dusknoir is your active Pokemon and would be knocked out by damage from your opponent's attack, you may discard all cards attached to Dusknoir Level X and put Dusknoir Level X as a stadium card into play instead of discarding it. This counts as Dusknoir being knocked out and your opponent takes a prize card. Be kind of broken if it didn't, right? As long as you have Dusknoir Level X as a stadium card in play, put 1 damage counter on each of your opponent's Pokemon between turns. If another stadium comes into play or Dusknoir Level X is discarded by the effects of any attacks, Poké Powers or Poké Bodies, Trainer or Supporter cards, return Dusknoir Level X to your hand. Now, in terms of language, Poké Powers and Poké Bodies have basically just been balled up and they're now abilities. And what used to be called Trainer cards were items, whereas now it's Trainer Item, Trainer Stadium, etc. So there we go. So when it got knocked out, it became a stadium card that was kind of like Shrine of Punishment is nowadays. Except it was for all of your opponent's Pokemon, not just GX's. It was for all of your opponent's Pokemon. And that dropped a lot of damage very, very quickly indeed. Now look, obviously it's not good enough in and of itself. At the end of the day, it only comes in when you've actually had Dusknoir KO'd. Now, Level X only gave up 1 prize, incidentally, but still only comes in when you've had it KO'd. And it's a Stage 2 that you then need to level up again. So frankly, it's it's getting a little bit awkward at this stage, if I'm honest with you. But let's be honest, right? It's a cool ability if you can get it working. Now, we will have a quick look at decks that can get it working in a minute, but there are a couple of other cards I just want to bring your attention to quickly, one of which was Level Max. Now, Level Max didn't see play in a huge amount of decks. Generally speaking, Level Max was reserved for decks that really needed lots of Level X's in play, but what you basically did, it was an item card, and you flipped a coin, and if heads, you search for a Level X and just put it onto that Pokemon straight away. It was kind of irrelevant for Dusknoir a lot of the time, because Dusknoir was going to be in the active and KO'd in order to work, and if it's going to be in the active, you might as well wait for it to be in the active and then Level X it, but nice if your opponent was going to gust it off the bench, etc. And the other one that's just worth pointing out here was Premier Ball. Premier Ball let you search your deck or discard pile for a Pokemon Level X and put it into your hand. So it was very nice for actually getting your Level X's and getting them out the discard pile. Although most of the time it was kind of rare that you would ever see Dusknoir in the discard pile, not unless it actually got discarded, say, from your hand, because the reality is that if it gets discarded, because it's knocked out, well, it goes into a stadium, and you're golden. Of course, this was kind of needed because we had Luxury Ball at the time, and Luxury Ball was a phenomenal card that let you search for any Pokemon other than a Level X, but if you had one in your discard pile, you couldn't play it, a one of in basically every deck. But anyway, back to Dusknoir. I've told you what it did, I've told you why it was cool, but the reality is, a card like this, as weird as it is, and it was, it's far more interesting if it is a good, playable card than if it's just, oh, it's a Pokemon that turned into a stadium. Oh, gee whiz, isn't that fun? So let's take a look at probably the main deck in which it was played. And it really was a Dusknoir deck. Now, the main Dusknoir we're looking for here was the one from Stormfront. Now, the one from Stormfront was an awful lot of fun. See, what you would do, it had a lovely Poké Power Shadow Command. Once during your turn, you may draw 2 cards, and then if you've got 7 or more cards in your hand, discard until you've got 6. Then put 2 damage counters on Dusknoir. Cool. You see, you would do this for a couple of turns and it would do 2 things. It would let you draw a whole bunch of cards, which was really nice because you're playing a stage 2 deck you want to get set up. But it would also put damage on Dusknoir, ready for the damage even attack. Count the number of damage counters on Dusknoir, put that many damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. That's not the active, it could be the active, but it doesn't have to be the active. That's what's so gosh darned nice here. Now, you also had the attack Night Spin, needed 1 more energy, 50 damage, and made you immune to any Pokemon with 2 or less energy attached, which was really good against some really low energy decks we had at the time. Things like Gyarados, for instance, played very little energy. Things like Machamp tended to play rather little energy. Things like Luxray Level X tended to play very little energy. Things like Gengar tended to play very little energy. All of those decks generally played 2 or fewer energy, so having Night Spin to make yourself immune to them was kind of fun. Didn't do a huge amount of damage, but it was quite nice for giving yourself that immunity. Now, we also had one of the Dusknoir from Diamond and Pearl. I do like the Dark Palm attack. If your opponent's got 4 or more bench Pokemon, choose one, shuffle it and all cards attached to it into their deck. And there was actually a really fun combo here with the Lumineon from Stormfront, whereby if it was active, and it does have free retreat to get out the active, you can choose a basic Pokemon from your opponent's hand and put it onto their bench, then switch it with the defending Pokemon, so you can bring some random rubbish Pokemon from their hand into the active. Lumineon's then got free retreat, and you can use Dusknoir's ability to get rid of one of the Pokemon on the bench that they actually want to keep. So if your opponent is deliberately only keeping free bench Pokemon, Lumineon can give them a 4th, drag the new rubbish one in the active, and then you can get rid of one they actually want to keep. It's kind of hilarious. Of course, and this shouldn't surprise many of you at this stage, but the other really important part to this deck was Spiritomb. Now, Spiritomb had the Keystone Seal Pokebody ability, which basically stopped your opponent and yourself playing trainer cards. Remember, back then it meant items. But for 0 energy, you got to search your deck for a Pokemon that evolved from one of your bench Pokemon, and then just evolve it up. So this was how you got up to your stage 2 quite so easily. The deck you could if you wanted, but the deck didn't even need to play Rare Candy, because Spiritomb would just get you up and rolling. About the only other really important part to the deck was Mewtwo Level X, which just gave you immunity to basic Pokemon. You're playing Psychic Energy for Dusknoir anyway, it's nice to have immunity to all those SP Pokemon. You had a decent lock against them with the Stormfront Dusknoir, but Mewtwo was a bit more of a hard counter that we liked just a little bit more. It was an extremely fun deck, very, very much indeed. Now, one tiny little side note. In order for Dusknoir to actually be brought back as a stadium, it needed to be knocked out by damage from your opponent's attack. And not all of them did that. So you would have plenty of Pokemon out there like Gengar, for instance, using Shadow Room, probably the most well-known example during that period. One Psychic Energy and you placed 3 damage counters. So what Gengar decks would try and do is take the KO using Shadow Room. Ironically, Gengar had Fainting Spell, which KO'd you on a coin flip if you KO'd Gengar with damage from an attack. So something like Shadow Room would also be used very nicely against Gengar. And actually, because you've got an ability, Gengar would drop 6 damage counters. So what you would do is just use Unknown G. Unknown G was primarily actually used as a Machamp counter, but it prevented any effective attacks other than damage when it was attached as a tool. So this wouldn't really do much against Machamp. Machamp knocks out basics. This isn't a basic. But what it would do is stop your opponent dropping damage counters, or in fact KOing you in any other way other than damage, which basically guaranteed that your ability fired. This was a weird card, ladies and gentlemen. It was a weird card, it was a fun card, it was a Pokemon that turned into a stadium, but then when it got discarded, it went straight back to your hand. Maybe there are other really super weird cards, but I'll tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, there weren't many. If you think you've got another example of a weirder Pokemon card, let me know in the comment section, would ya? We can do a follow-up video. But for now, I'd like to know what you think about this card and the deck in which it was primarily played, or any other deck in which you remember it being played. Go nuts in the comment section, ladies and gentlemen, but please be nice, would ya? And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And please do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WasiPlays, where we talk about a whole bunch of games that don't even have any Pokemon in. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.